time with you this morning, looking at the production line, looking at the skill, a commitment that goes into each and every one of those bespoke cars that comes out of here is incredible to see. And I find it really uplifting. You, I hope, must find it uplifting to work here and to be part of what is going on here, because this is high-grade, high-skilled, fantastic work.
Well, it brought back echoes of Rachel Reeves' time at a factory in Manchester.
The lifeblood of growth and therefore of living standards. The single greatest barrier that businesses told me was standing in their way. And put simply, our plan, the central barrier to economic growth has been underinvestment. The two recent numbers showed Britain to be the fastest growing economy in the G7, while young people are presenting...
Welcome to UK Post Hug. Please subscribe to the channel for daily updates on hot topics concerning UK politics and royal family, with detailed breakdown. There are moments when economic data presents what appears to be unambiguously good news, when headlines trumpet improvements that seem to benefit everyone, when the superficial narrative suggests recovery and optimism are finally taking hold. The mortgage market is currently providing exactly such a moment, with lenders engaged in a fierce battle for business that has driven rates down to levels not seen in years. Barclays, Santander, NatWest, Nationwide, and other major lenders have all slashed their best available rates in recent weeks, with some deals now available at an astonishing 3.51%. For homeowners and prospective buyers who have endured years of punishing interest rate rises, this represents genuinely welcome relief. Yet, as always with economic statistics, the full picture is considerably more complex and considerably less uniformly positive than the headlines suggest. Dig beneath the surface, examine the regional variations and the distributional impacts, and a far more troubling story emerges about winners and losers in Labour's Britain. Homeowners and prospective buyers are indeed facing what some are calling a mortgage boost, as lenders collectively battle for business and drop rates to their lowest levels in over 3 years. This competition among lenders has produced headline rates as low as 3.51%, a figure that would have seemed impossible just 18 months ago, when rates were climbing towards 7% in the aftermath of market turmoil. Those homeowners on fixed-term 5-year deals taken out during the post-lockdown buying spree in 2020 have been watching with considerable concern as their deals approached expiry at the end of this year. At the time they locked in their mortgages, they benefited from extremely low interest rates, often well below 2%, in an environment where the Bank of England base rate sat at historic lows and where nobody anticipated the inflationary surge that would follow. Across 2022 and 2023, rates rose rapidly as the Bank of England attempted to combat inflation that had spiraled out of control following massive government spending during lockdown, supply chain disruptions, and the energy price shock triggered by Russia's invasion of Ukraine. While both inflation and interest rates have been on a downward march since reaching their peaks, rates remain substantially higher than the ultra-low environment that persisted for over a decade following the 2008 financial crisis. Homeowners coming off those cheap 2020 deals face the prospect of remortgaging onto rates that, while falling, remain multiples of what they currently pay. A household that locked in a rate of 1.5% in 2020 might now be looking at rates of 4 or even 5%. Representing a doubling or tripling of their mortgage costs. But with budget uncertainty leaving people unsure whether they should sell up in the latter part of the year, the property market has stalled, and lenders have taken measures into their own hands to stimulate activity. A succession of mortgage product drops in the lead-up to Rachel Reeves' catastrophic November budget and in the week since has seen the likes of Barclays, Santander, NatWest, Nationwide and others all lower their best available rates. This aggressive repricing reflects lenders' expectation that the Bank of England's Monetary Policy Committee will vote to lower the base rate again, continuing the gradual unwinding of the emergency interest rate rises implemented to combat inflation. It is important to understand that mortgage deals are based on swap rates rather than directly on the Bank of England base rate. Swap rates reflect market expectations about where interest rates will be over the term of the mortgage, and they move in anticipation of base rate changes, rather than simply following them mechanically. The expectation among market participants is that some deals could continue to drop as the battle for customers intensifies and as confidence grows that inflation is under control and further base rate cuts are coming. Competition among lenders is good for consumers, driving down prices and improving terms as each institution attempts to capture market share. It is notable then that the average 2-year and 5-year fixed deals are now both below 5%, representing their lowest rates since September 2022, just before the mini-budget catastrophe under Liz Truss that sent rates soaring and crashed the pound. According to Money Facts, which tracks mortgage market data comprehensively, this represents a meaningful milestone in the gradual normalization of borrowing costs. Barclays will see some remortgage deals go as low as 3.7% from Tuesday. NatWest has a 3.62% offering. Santander has one product going as low as 3.51%. A rate that would have seemed fantastical during the dark days of late 2022 and early 2023 when the mortgage market was in chaos. Nationwide, the second-largest mortgage provider in the United Kingdom saw its lowest rate appear last week at 3.58%. This represents the first time in more than 3 years that the Building Society has offered a fixed mortgage rate below the 3.6% mark, another symbolic milestone suggesting genuine improvement in market conditions. For borrowers who have endured years of steadily rising costs, the psychological impact of seeing rates with a 3 at the front rather than a 5 or 6 cannot be understated. However, and this caveat is crucial, it should be noted that the very best headline deals are usually reserved for borrowers with substantial equity in their properties, specifically for those seeking loan-to-value arrangements around 60%. If you own 40% of your home outright and need to borrow only the remaining 60%, you represent a low-risk proposition for lenders and consequently qualify for their most competitive rates. These headline-grabbing deals can also often have substantial fees attached to them, sometimes running into thousands of pounds, which means they are not always the best option for everyone's particular circumstances. A mortgage with a slightly higher rate but lower fees might work out cheaper over the term than a headline rate with eye-watering arrangement costs. But even acknowledging these caveats, the proliferation of competitive rates across different lenders and different product types represents genuine improvement. The lowering of rates across the board, across many products with different lenders, is better for consumers because more choice in their price range and loan-to-value bracket becomes available. Competition works. When lenders fight for business, borrowers benefit. This is basic economics functioning as it should. And in that sense, the current mortgage rate environment represents unambiguous good news for those in a position to take advantage of it. Yet, here is where the story becomes considerably darker and where the political dimension becomes impossible to ignore. Property prices across the United Kingdom have risen only marginally month to month recently, suggesting a market that has stalled rather than collapsed, but that certainly is not booming. However, digging deeper into the data reveals stark regional disparities that tell a very different story depending on where you live. Jonathan Hopper of Garrington Property Finders pointed out that the regional differences have created what economists call a K-shaped development, where different segments of the market move in opposite directions simultaneously. Prices in the north of England, Scotland and Northern Ireland ratcheted up while they fell in London and surrounding counties. This K-shaped pattern, where some regions rise while others fall, creates winners and losers based purely on geography. If you own property in Manchester or Glasgow or Belfast, you have likely seen your home's value appreciate over the past year. If you own property in London or the home counties, you have likely watched your single largest asset decline in value, potentially wiping out tens of thousands of pounds of equity. And in prime areas of London, the areas where the wealthiest and most internationally mobile residents live, are seeing prices fall by substantially more than 1%. This represents a vote of no confidence in London's future under Labour, a judgment by wealthy buyers that the combination of higher taxes, increased regulation, and a government hostile to success and wealth creation makes London less attractive than competing global cities. The expectation among property market analysts is that falling mortgage rates combined with declining property prices might push mid-market and first-time buyers into action in the new year as both borrowing costs and purchase prices become more attractive simultaneously. This would represent a genuine opportunity for those who had been priced out of ownership, who had watched helplessly as property values soared beyond their reach. If rates continue falling and prices continue moderating, particularly in expensive southern markets, a window may open for buyers who thought home ownership was permanently beyond their grasp. Tom Bill, head of UK residential research at Knight Frank, one of the most prestigious property consultancies in the country, offered his analysis. In a year when budget speculation kept a lid on demand for most of the final 6 months, steady mortgage rates underpinned housing market activity. We expect rates to keep drifting lower in 2026, and sub-4% mortgages will become available across a wider range of loan-to-value deals. This represents cautious optimism about the mortgage market trajectory, suggesting that the competition among lenders will continue and that rates will drift down toward and potentially below